So guys, this will be a talking head video for the podcast right here at busyworksbeats.com. And recently I pulled out a lot of my synths. So I have the Moog Subsequent 37. I have the Prophet 6 right here. I have the Prophet 8 behind me. We were creating some jams with this stuff. And I said how some of the stuff we can't emulate through plugins, which is completely true. But then I realized very quickly as I was watching YouTube, music production YouTube, I realized very quickly people only listen to the talking heads who have a bunch of gear behind them as if the gear makes them more credible for what they're saying. And it's the same effect. Here's something I learned from a big studio. He said, most of the stuff in here, we don't even turn on. He's like, this console, this is for when people walk in, they go, wow, there's a console. And it's like, they might rarely use the console. Or if they walk in and they see all this outboard gear, like 1176s, LA2As, just a bunch of outboard processing. It's like we use plugins nowadays, but because it's on the wall and because it's lit up, the customers go, wow, I'm in a legit space. This must be a legit studio to record in. And another producer told me, he said, you see all these plaques on the wall? He's like, we don't really need that for us. That's for the customers coming in to feel like they're in a special place. And I realized this same effect is happening to music producers on YouTube. I'm not criticizing people who have gear. I'm talking about the people who get confused thinking that because somebody has a bunch of gear in their studio that they know what they're talking about. Because there's a thing that I said on Twitter, I said, which caused a lot of reaction here. And I said, I'm realizing music producers only listen to the other producers with a bunch of gear in their studios. There is no need for gear in 2025 for music production. Music producers only need their earphones and a laptop, which is completely true. That's what I started with, was nothing but, some Apple earphones, like these ones, some Apple earphones and a laptop. That's all I had. The next thing I bought was some headphones, which I probably could have saved money on the headphones, honestly, but they were like $150 at the time. And then after that, I bought an audio interface, not because I needed it, because I used to think audio interfaces would make such a huge difference in sound. And what I realized is that you really only need an audio interface if you're going to record something, like people record a synthesizer, record your microphone. If you're doing tutorials or content, you might need an audio interface. If you're not doing that, what do you need the audio interface for? Like, your computer has pretty high level stuff inside the computer. Now, back then, I think I thought that because the computer I had, it would offset some of the processing onto the audio interface and kind of lighten up the load on the computer. But the computer still crapped out when we had too many plugins. So it's like that didn't solve much of anything. It just made me feel like I was going somewhere. And I guess my point in making this video is to tell you guys who are beginners is that you think, and this, I'm talking to myself really, I used to think that, I want to move to the next tier of music production. Meaning like, okay, if I just get the next piece of outboard gear, I'll be more of a music producer. If I get in a bigger space, I'll be more of a music producer. I literally went from my parents' extra bedroom. That was my first studio spot. I used to sleep on the floor so I could create space because I took out my bed and I made a studio with a computer desk. And, over time, I first started on the actual bed with a laptop and just Apple earphones. Then I said, let me sacrifice this bed. Let me sleep on the floor and build this like computer desk, which I didn't build the desk, but it was a small desk. I was going to say build a studio. And it was just a simple computer desk with a computer on top. I think I used my laptop at the time. I can't remember the computer. I think it was desktop at that time. And then a simple audio interface for making YouTube videos. And then from there, I moved into my own place and I converted one of the rooms into a studio, which you guys have seen. And I thought I had to get the Korg this, the Yamaha this, the sound module this, the percussion instruments, the guitar, half the stuff I didn't even use. Like, that's the truth behind it, is half the stuff I did not even use, probably way more than half of the stuff I didn't use or didn't even know how to use to the full degree that I know how to now. I don't know if that's proper English or not. But I had two studios because I was just so thinking that if I just get the next piece of gear, then I'll be more of a music producer. So I had a PC studio in one room and I had a Mac studio in the other room. And I barely used the Mac studio room because it was just too far away from my computer. And I used the PC room way more for live streaming and stuff like that. But did I need all that gear behind me? And the answer is no. Like, if anything, it just caused me to just make content and make beats that just were distractions, to be honest. So I moved from that place out to California, and I'm trying to think of my Cali setup. So I had a 4-bedroom place in California, San Diego to be specific. And one of the rooms, like, this is just me living there, nobody else, just me. I slept in the master bedroom, and I had one room for a studio. Every other room was unoccupied. Like I had a library because I have a bunch of books in on bookshelves, and then I had an empty guest room. Like I did not need all that space because our brain as young people is if I just get to the next tier, I'll be more whatever, more successful, more comfortable, whatever the word is. We think that the next thing is going to bring that for us. And then from California, I moved back to PA. The home had technically more square footage, but I put the studio in the basement, as you guys have seen. And over time, you guys saw me decorate the basement to make it look more like cool over time. Because at first it didn't look that cool. And then I realized, okay, if I get some good lighting, I've put all my keyboards up, it'll look nice. And I had a bunch of keyboards behind me, and I didn't use the keyboards like that. Now I did get into sound design at that time. So I did use the keyboards for sound design. Like I showed you guys how to sound design or how good I can sound design on stuff like the Prophet 6, the Prophet 08, and the Moog we messed with the other day. And this stuff is more for sound designers. Like if you're not a sound designer, you don't need gear. And I don't think people can understand this. And let me tell you guys even more of a story is that continuing this flow, again, I went from my parents' extra bedroom, nothing but a laptop and a dream, to my own place. And then I had 2 studios, which I didn't even use the other studio. And then I went to California, had one room for a studio. All I did was basically live streaming there and only use my Korg Kronos and like my Moog Subsequent 37. I didn't really use anything else. Maybe a couple Prophet 6 times I used that. And then I came back to PA, and you guys saw me in the basement. Okay. And then, from that basement, it was, all my stuff was laid out to where you guys could see it. Some stuff was even off camera. You couldn't even see, but that didn't make me feel like more of a music producer. I even bought outboard gear. Oh, I forgot part of the story is, during the pandemic, I found this was a new construction. So we got a space in a commercial studio space it was a commercial complex for studios. So it was like 10 studios in there. I had one of the studios with the biggest recording room. Now this is during the pandemic. So I went out, got all this stuff from Vintage King and got all this stuff from Sweetwater, got the whole recording chain, got the U87 in there with the acoustic treatment, which came with the place. I think the recording room was like 100 square feet. Just that alone was pretty crazy. I thought I'd be recording bands and stuff. And I realized very quickly, like, I have to drive 1 hour to get here over potholes. I have to come back at night, most of the time 2 a.m., sometimes 5 a.m., which is dangerous because you'll get sleepy on the road. And there's nothing more dangerous than being sleepy while it's dark outside or driving. There's nothing more dangerous. And then you have, one night I had to sleep, or maybe 1 or 2 nights I had to sleep in the studio because I was so afraid to drive home sleepy. So I slept in the recording booth. And then, and it had a bunch of stuff just, around the studio, but that didn't make music production more fun for me. And I think that's what people can't comprehend because they feel like, because they haven't had it, they feel like, oh, the next thing is the thing that I want that'll make me into more of a music producer. And I'll tell you guys from experience, I have gone through all these iterations of a music producer. I've had the analog outboard gear to where my vocal chain was pristine. Thanks to Mixbus TV, who put me on to a lot of stuff. I had the U87 going through, what was it, the Neves at the time? I think Neve 512Vs, if I'm not mistaken. Going into, I forgot the chain that fast. Going to a Mimos compressor from West Audio. That would go into an SSL EQ. So again, the vocals were pristine. Everything sounded super clean. Like I could record so well to where I could stand back from the microphone, like really far from the microphone, and it would sound like I was right up on the microphone. That's how much quality was in that vocal recording. But the thing is, I had to record myself. If I wasn't going to turn that space into a business, it was like, what is the point of being here? I have to drive here. It's 2 hours of my day just driving, going over potholes, risking, driving sleepy, which is super dangerous. And it's like I still went there and didn't have fun sometimes. You guys will see me live stream, but it wasn't fun. It just felt like I had to think about money all the time, and it wasn't like a creative thought. It wasn't like I could just wake up and do stuff. It was like I have to wake up, drive, be prepared. It was just like too much. And what I'm realizing is over time, is that, once I moved the studio room from what you guys saw was that dark, depressing basement. Okay, I moved it to the upstairs part, and now, I'm in a brighter room. We have sunlight. up here. I'm like close to my son, so he's behind the wall. So that's the only downside, is if he cries or something like that. But that's a small downside, because I'd rather just be around the light of the house as opposed to the darkness in the basement. And my point to tell you guys that is, this is the smallest, I guess, let me think if this is smaller. The smallest place technically was the first bedroom I started in. And maybe, I'm trying to think, is this room bigger than my other room? Let's just say it's the smaller corner. I started off in this corner. You guys can't see it, but I rearranged this room. So I started off in this corner. This was my smallest area I've ever had. Yeah, this is technically smaller. So I had the smallest area of this house ever, and my smallest studio, and I felt more comfortable, more at home than ever before. And I don't think you guys can comprehend that, because we always think, get the outboard gear, get this compressor, get this hardware, get this piece, get this. You don't realize with hardware, you're going to have a mess of cables, which cost just as much as the units. And then you have to, if something happens, let's say, the left signal drops out, you got to go behind everything and figure out what happened, which cable goes where, which you do use a schematic to map everything out. But it's just such a headache to just do basic stuff in hardware that I was like, why am I going through all this frustration just to get a 20% difference in the vocal recording? Now we'll create a standard for you to where your ear won't allow you to do anything of less quality. That is one of the drawbacks too. It's almost like becoming a music producer. You can't hear music the same anymore. When you hear a high quality vocal chain, it's hard to listen to anything else but that vocal chain. And all I'm saying is I think that's a negative, because now I don't record as much because I know how clean I could get it in that specific environment. But at the same time, the downside of that specific environment was the lack of creativity. I had everything I needed in that place and more. The mixing was pristine because of the acoustic treatment and the way the speakers are set up. And, everything was extremely perfect. But the thing was, I lost that creative, feeling. So all I'm trying to give you guys courage to do is to stop obsessing with thinking that you need the next outboard gear. Like, there's no hardware technically that a music producer needs. Even if you want to emulate outboard gear and hardware outboard gear, there's something called NAM profiles. It stands for the Neural Amp Modeler. And this is a technology that can take analog gear and use machine learning to basically allow us to use presets that maps perfectly the analog gear. And I have really good stuff from companies like Analog XAI. They've also worked with another creator called Analog for Life. He captured his, 4K console. I think it's an SSL 4K if I'm not mistaken. But it sounds incredible. All you got to is two knobs, gain and output gain. You just turn up the input gain till you get the crunch on your drums. You pull down the output gain. It's that simple. You don't need a $700 unit anymore to get a $7,000 sound. Now, is there an advantage to hardware and outboard gear? Yes. I mean, nothing sounds like it. It would make my simple beats sound very full of dynamic, full of depth. But the trade-off is that it kills creativity in some type of way. Because when I was producing, as you guys saw in the studio in 2020, 2021, is I would make these hard vocals and hard ideas and I'd be like, I'm done already. It's kind of like there's no work to it. So it felt it took away some of the struggle, I guess. And everything sounded good. Like, it sounded so good, I never had to touch my vocal chain, because it's like I'm my same vocal. So I would have to change the vocal settings. So you're not changing the vocal EQ all the time. You're not changing the compression. You're not changing anything. And I think because I wasn't changing anything, there was no difference. And so it felt the same all the time. So that is the weird drawback that you get from having perfect gear, is that it sounds so good, there's nothing to change. The only thing I would really mess with is the SSL Fusion. Just to give you guys like an example of the outboard gear I had was, so I told you guys the vocal chain, which was the U87, which is back here. Oh no, actually it's on the floor. But I have a U87, which is still here with me. What else was the chain? Okay, so 512V preamps from from API, pardon me. And then we ran into the MIMOS, which is a compressor that models the 1176. And then we ran into the SSL EQ for the vocal chain. Now, from my outboard stereo bus chain, I had tape emulators from Neve, I think 512. I'm forgetting all the numbers now. They're all 542, I think it is. Neve tape emulations. And then we had, or it might be 543. I forget the exact number. And then you need, here's another thing about gear. not only do you need the gear, you need the cables for the gear, you need the power supply for the gear, you need sometimes two pieces of the gear, because if you want to run stereo, you now need two of everything. So this is 500 series. And so I needed two Neve things. So it's not just $700, it's $1,400 plus you got to buy the chassis, which is another grand. And it's like you're spending all this money for 1/10 of the sound that you want from hardware. And you end up spending like tens of thousands of dollars just to get this chain where you still need more stuff. And if you guys look at the prices, I went to Vintage King recently just to see, and I made a little list for you guys. Let me pull it up. And just to show you guys I'm not BSing, here's the actual transactions from Vintage King back when I invested in that commercial studio. So this gear ran at least $8K plus, this is just the base price, because you have to buy cables and all that other stuff. So this isn't even the entire thing. But I pulled this up to pull up I think it's called the wish list. And on the wish list, I saved a bunch of items from, back in 2020 of stuff I was just looking at. Now, if I look at this, a 542 is the tape emulator. So 542 is that number. Now, those had a very specific sound that I liked. So it is a benefit to having these. Now, they've definitely gone up in price. Okay, so two of these, you're already at $1,600, and you need the chassis, which is $1,000. So now you're at $2,000. This is just for one part of the sound. You're spending $2,000. You can get for $2,000, you can get a whole MacBook or a whole Mac in general, Mac Mini or whatever, and you could do a lot of business with the Mac without this gear. Okay, and buy a couple plugins and be way closer to your target than spending this much on stuff. And I think we idolize gear because it costs so much. We think, oh, he has the $10,000 thing, so he must know more than me because he has the $10,000 thing. It's like, yeah, he might know how to work it and plug it in, but like that doesn't help you guys grow. And you're learning from people, and they're called the 512C that I had, not V, sorry. Or I think I had the V. Either way, I forgot all the names. It's like we're learning from people who are teaching us on this whole setup that's like $20,000 to $50,000, but we're using plugins that don't even remotely get us close to what they're doing. So it's like, why are we learning from people who don't even have the same setup as us? We should be learning from the people who are just bare bones stock plugins, maybe Waves plugins, maybe Arturia stuff, maybe like the stuff we actually use. Like nothing sounds like this Korg. Like this Korg Kronos is supreme. Now, the equivalent I might show you guys is like a Roland Cloud or something like that. Now, it won't be the exact same as the Korg, but it's close enough. But some of this hardware, there is no equivalent. There's nothing that sounds like hardware. Nothing. There's absolutely nothing that sounds like hardware, at least yet. Now, with those NAND profiles, I'm curious to see where it could go from here. So again, all this gear, if I added this up, I think I put this in the cart just to mess around. I didn't want to hit checkout because I didn't want to click anything by accident. I think the cart totaled $40,000. $40,000. How many of you guys have $40,000? This is just to get one chain, because again, when you get into the hardware world, you can't just have one compressor. You have to have a compressor. You have to have the clock device. You have to have the converter potentially. You have to have the power supply. You have to have the cables, the patch bay. You have to have the chain. You can't just have one thing, and you don't realize it until you get into hardware. It's like you can't just get one thing. You have to get 7 things. And, that could easily total $40,000. And it's insane to think that we believe that we have to do this. This is for people who are building commercial recording studios. So if you want to be a producer who is a recording engineer who wants to make this into a recording business, which is not always about music. You could be recording voiceovers. You could be recording just bands or orchestra. You could be recording just vibes or live events, church events. It's not always about music all of the time. And if you want to run that type of business, then yeah, hardware matters. But if you guys are trying to make beats and produce for artists, tell me when any of that gear comes into play. I'll go back to this list. Now, unless we're talking synthesizers, which again, you don't even need synthesizers because you have companies like Arturia. You have companies like UA with the outboard gear emulations. You have companies like, who else does like Roland Cloud, where you get in for $20 a month. You get access to thousands of dollars worth of keyboard sounds. So it's like, when would we ever need hardware? And if anybody can make a good argument in the comments, I would love to hear it. But this is for recording studios. Okay, so I want to make a very clear distinction. Is like the one thing that, the secret to mixing is actually getting a great recording. Like I showed you guys in that Beyonce acapella, all we had to do was add EQ and a compressor. We added Pro C2 to just level out the, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. It was just jumpy, so we flattened it out with the compressor. And then we slapped the Spectre EQ on just for like extra brightness and extra body from the 120 zone. That's all we needed for the vocal to sound good. That's because when you record well, you do not need a bunch of plugins. But all these companies are trying to sell us all these plugins and all this outboard gear. It's like you only need an EQ and a compressor when you have a good recording environment. And again, as producers, we're like, oh, if I just make my studio bigger, I'll be more of a producer. It actually makes you more uncomfortable when your studio becomes too big. And again, if you guys have never felt that, it's hard to really, it's kind of like the people who think $1 million is going to change them. And then you get $1 million and you're like, wow, I still feel the same. And I still feel like I have to get more. And I still feel like, it doesn't end anything. It's not an end goal. It doesn't just make you into a different person just because you made $1 million. Okay. The same thing. If you guys get this big studio, it might motivate you initially, but like over time, you become used to it the same way you did before. And you might even be more inspired in your home studios than your actual commercial studios, because again, it turns into a job when you have to, manage a commercial studio. It turns into a business and a job. And it does take away the fun because you don't feel like you have that creative edge anymore. And maybe I'm speaking for other people, but that is my true experience. And you guys have seen the studio to know that I've gone through these iterations. And I'll tell you that the most fun I've ever had is in a home studio with very little gear. I barely use these speakers because I don't want the neighbors to be going crazy because these speakers are loud. That's why I love these little small iLoud by IK Multimedia. They're called the iLoud Micro Monitor Pros. I like the small ones, but they have a big sound. And the cool part is I can go to a different room and like the speakers will be going, but I won't realize that they're going. Whereas if I have my Eve Audio SC 3070s on, you hear those around the house. You can't really get away from that sound. It's just so big of a sound. So that is my final thought here. I'm not going to spend a decade on this, but I guess what I'm trying to say is when I put up this Twitter, I said, I'm realizing music producers only listen to other producers who have gear in their studios. Look at all the talking videos on YouTube right now. This video is not targeted to anybody. I'm not here to critique other creators. I'm just saying that I've noticed that people tend to put more credibility towards people with gear behind them because they feel like that's where they want to be. And they think more gear gets them closer to where they're trying to go. It doesn't mean that specific company is going to be more educational. Like, in fact, it's probably leading you down, this thing where we think the next piece of gear is going to get us closer. And it's just not the case. Hopefully I made my case here, but it says, I'm realizing music producers only listen to other producers with a bunch of gear in their studios. There is no need for gear in 2025 for music production. Music producers only need their earphones and a laptop. And again, if you guys can make a good argument below, outside of being a recording engineer, I see no need, and I want to use the word specifically, no need for gear, even an audio interface. And Charles says, what's your best record? And I said, I like my late stuff on YouTube. Divinity says, and an audio interface. And I said, if you record for sure, but if you're not recording, I don't think you really need that. He said, but since the years I got used to MIDI keyboards. Now, one thing I will say is probably MIDI keyboards are essential for music production. I used to click in a lot of notes, but you lose a lot of the dynamic when you click in notes. There is a way to make it sound like you're playing it, but there is a huge difference. So one piece of gear I'll say is a MIDI controller. That's one piece that I forgot. So MIDI controller definitely does make a difference in music production when you plug it up. He says, but since the years I got used to my MIDI keyboards, I won't go back to tapping in the PC keyboard. That makes sense. Illusionist says they should start listening to ones with FL Studio and Pro Tools. To ones with to people, you mean? Loud says, I've been using nothing but my laptop and my headphones. Expensive equipment isn't necessary at all. I mean, it's true. It's just that everybody thinks the next thing is going to transform them. And again, it's like the grass is greener type of mindset. Cleanupper says, it's good to learn the gear though. I agree. I learned the 1176 from Universal Audio plugins. I didn't have to get a real 1176. When I'm in a studio with, for example, my mentor, Ron DiSilvestro, for recording, he might have a Blueface 1176. It's like I know what the gain reduction knob is and I know what the gain knob is. So it's like, I mean, that one's a little more simple because it's two knobs, but I know what the ratios do. I know the sound of it because I learned from companies like UA, Universal Audio. And I think we can learn and get educated without actually spending thousands of dollars on gear. Okay, let's continue on. So Skitty says, "Loud it, my goat. Loud it, my goat." B Done Music says, "Agreed." Mikey Hustle says, "Let people do them. You need whatever you want." I feel like as an educator, so I'm not trying to critique his response. I'm saying as an educator, I have a responsibility to let people know, like, I know all this stuff behind me looks flashy, but in reality, that could lead you down spending thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that you don't need to spend. You can spend that money in much more fruitful ways than getting more gear. All right. So that is the response here on this tweet. So let me know what you guys believe. But I got tongue twisted. Let me know what you guys believe below. I am curious to see people's arguments. I think the one piece, if I had to say anything for anybody skipped all the way to the end, the one piece of gear you might need is a MIDI controller. Outside of that, as a music producer, you don't need any gear. All right, guys, only earphones and a computer, a decent computer that works fast. I would even say the laptops are worse than things like the Mac Mini or desktop setup because laptops overheat. That's the one thing they don't tell you is laptops overheat and you can't do anything about it. Doesn't matter how much money you spend on a laptop, that thing will probably overheat. So try to go for desktop if you can. The only benefit to laptops is that it's more portable. But if you're not like going from studio to studio to studio to studio every single day, it's like, why do you need to bring a laptop all the time? All right, y'all. I'm going to end this video here. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe if you're new. It's a game from busyworkspeaks.com. Peace.